Hello and welcome to today's Nutrition and Medical Sciences undergraduate open event. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Anisa Chaudhry and I am a former Nutrition and Medical Sciences student here at UCL, and I'm also your chair for this afternoon. With this session, we're hoping that we'll be able to address those course-specific questions that you may have, and we'll help you to gain an insight into what it's really like to study at UCL studying Nutrition and Medical Sciences. So this afternoon, we have Adrian Slee as our host, and he will introduce you to the exciting field of nutrition and medical sciences, and then that will be followed by an overview of the structure of the program available. There will also be a Q&A session and plenty of interactive opportunities for you all to join in throughout today's session. And just to note, this session is being recorded and will be made available following today's event. I'm also here to respond to any questions you may have, so please do share those throughout the session using the Q&A function on Zoom. So now to introduce our speaker, so we have, as I mentioned, Adrian Slee. Dr. Slee is a registered nutritionist and course director for the BSc in Nutrition and Medical Sciences at UCL. He also teaches and coordinates several modules on both undergraduate and MSc programs and teaches topics including nutrition throughout the life cycle, body composition, and many more. He also conducts research examining the importance of malnutrition in aging and how this relates to frailty. So thank you very much for listening, and thank you, Adrian. Now it's over to you.
Thanks, Anisa. Much appreciated. So hi to you guys today. If you would like to use a chat, please do. It's nice to see people just interacting, even just say hi or anything, or got a question, please use the chat. So give you a bit of background. So as I say, so I'm the course director for the Nutrition and Medical Science degree. I'm an associate professor in nutrition, division of medicine. So my original background was a degree in physiology and biochemistry with nutrition. And I had a particular, very strong interest in things like metabolism. And I was interested at the time in things such as muscle wasting conditions in clinical diseases. I was interested in things like muscle growth and metabolism and sports nutrition as well, and obesity. And I got a lot out of my undergraduate degree. I really had a strong passion for these topics, and it led me to do a PhD. So I did my PhD at University of Nottingham, and specifically it was more molecular, in that I was looking at specifically skeletal muscle and metabolism and some molecular aspects, for example, looking at gene expression of specific components of systems that regulate protein metabolism in muscle, that are regulated by different things such as nutrition, exercise, and drugs. And the reason this is important is because muscle is an important metabolic organ that is important during disease states, for example. So what happens is in specific diseases, and a good example, something like cancer, for example, is that the muscle becomes an important functional organ to fuel the immune system. So I was really interested in this. So I did a PhD, and then I became a lecturer, and I've worked at a number of different institutions. And although my key focus is more teaching focused, actually, and I've been a course leader a couple of times, different universities on different degrees, both nutrition degrees and also exercise sciences type degrees. But I've always tried to maintain my research, and I've got a strong research interest in, again, the things that I just mentioned, basically. So things such as muscle wasting and conditions. There's something called sarcopenia, something called cachexia, you might have heard of before. And I've also been interested in things like just malnutrition, for example, in older people and in frailty. And I've been interested in how to screen for these conditions and how to improve them. And to try to improve the way we do things in the UK, because it has effects on clinical outcomes and things like quality of life and morbidity and mortality in patients. And the key point to all this, why I'm saying this, is because I had an interest and a passion. It's because of my BSc degree. So if you have an interest in nutrition, okay, and specifically our course is Nutrition and Medical Science, is very clinically focused, and we have also offer a range of master's degree programs as well that I'll talk to you about later, is that maybe this is the program for you and can lead to many different things. And the other thing to note is when we talk about the research, is our courses are very research focused. Obviously, you'll probably be aware that UCL is a top research intensive institution, and all of that research tends to filter down into our teaching. So typically you have some really cutting edge modules, and we do have that on our BSc Nutrition Medical Science degree, where we talk about, cutting edge nutritional sciences topics. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to share my screen, and I've got a PowerPoint to show you. So we have a few slides to show you. Then I'm going to dart around the screen showing a few websites as well, and a timetable as well for a specific module, to give you an example. And let's just quickly go to the presentation slides. So can you see that okay, everyone? Anissa, could you see that okay?
Yeah, I can see that. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. So we have this really fantastic nutrition and medical sciences degree at UCL, which is really novel. We designed it in mind of, it links to typically, actually when you think about it, our MSc program. We have an MSc in Clinical and Public Health Nutrition, has been running for about 12 years now. So this BSc was set up on the back of that about 5 years ago. And we've tried to modify things so it's very specialised, and you won't find another course like it in the UK, where it's very basically medical sciences focused. And if, for example, you want to go into something later on, such as dietetics, for example, and become a clinical dietitian, and that's what Anissa is doing, Anissa's studying to become a clinical dietitian, then again, maybe this is the course for you. Now, the other thing to note is our courses are fully accredited with the Association for Nutrition. And if you want to become a nutritionist in the UK, you have to do a course that's accredited with the Association for Nutrition. This is the governing body in the UK. And I've got a slide on that at the end, and I'll also show you the website. So what do we cover? So in our first year of the degree, it's very applied medical sciences focused. And what you do is you bring everyone up to speed, where you'll learn specific, more generic physiology and pathophysiology alongside other courses. So for example, we have the integrated medical sciences programs, where we have nutrition and medical science along with applied medical sciences. We have many other courses, for example, sports and exercise medical sciences, for example. We have medical science engineering, we have, and cancer biomedicine. And in the first year, all the students are taught similar modules in physiology and pathophysiology. And then you will do one specific module that is specific to your course. So for example, for nutrition, in the second term in the first year, you will do a nutrition metabolism module. And so that's then your first real exposure to nutrition. But with this, there's great flexibility. So for example, we've had students, I can think a few years ago, where we had some applied medical science students who took the nutrition module as their optional module, and they fell in love with nutrition. They thought, this is fantastic. We're really interested in metabolism and all the rest of it. And so they converted and switched to do nutrition medical sciences. And one of those students actually has gone on to do a PhD, for example. And so we first of all, we have that flexibility within our program in the first year. And similarly, we have students, for example, I can think of some students who were particularly wanted to do graduate entry medicine. They wanted to study for medicine. And so they switched to applied medical sciences and then gone on to do graduate entry medicine at another university. So we have that built into our system. Now, in the second and third year, that's when you do all the key and also cutting edge modules specifically on nutrition. So we have modules on nutrition metabolism. We talk about obesity, we talk about malnutrition. So things like undernutrition, malnutrition, as well as obesity, malnutrition. We have a module on growth and development, where we cover everything from pre-pregnancy and pregnancy, childhood nutrition, all the way through the life cycle. We have also specific modules on sports nutrition. We have clinical nutrition modules, which again become really important if you want to go off to study dietetics and become a dietitian. And we have also some very important modules on public health nutrition, behavioral nutrition, and also one of my own interests is specifically frailty and aging. And then we have a module in the third year on that. But we also offer many optional modules. So for example, the way the programs run, I'll just show you here. So for example, this is our year 2 course structure. As you'll see, if you can see my arrow here, so you've got these core modules here that I'll talk about in a second, but we also have optional modules. So the idea is that you can take one optional module in year 2 and in year 3, but only one. And the reason you can only take one optional module is that our course has been fully set up and accredited with Association of Nutrition. So all those modules have to meet certain learning outcomes, okay? So key requirements, so you can become an associate registered nutritionist at the end of this, okay? But we do have some really interesting optional modules. So for example, if you're interested in cancer, we have applied medical science modules on cancer in terms of looking at it from a molecular perspective and treatment perspective, but we also have some very specific nutrition modules. So we have a nutrition and cancer risk module, and that looks at epidemiological research. So for example, look at the relationship between different foods and cancer. So it could be, for example, you've probably seen in the news that, for example, there's a relationship with alcohol and cancer risk, alcohol intake, or red meat and cancer risk, or consuming lots of phytonutrients from plants. Okay, lots of plant-based foods, it has an anti-cancer effect, for example. So in that module, we get the students to evaluate the current research on this and look at how nutrition affects cancer risk, for example. And modules like that work very nicely hand in hand, side by side, with modules here. This is another core module, molecular basic disease, that also the applied medical science students take. And again, this gives us a feel and understanding of specific disease states, like, for example, cancer and many other diseases, like, for example, diabetes, and understanding how the pathophysiology of these conditions at a molecular level, and understanding how that works. We also have we have basic nutrition and metabolism modules. So for example, we have a nutrition metabolism 1 in the first year and a nutrition metabolism 2 in the second year, where we talk about what happens in different organs. So for example, what happens in skeletal muscle when you exercise, what happens to muscle metabolism, how, for example, you can, run a marathon, for example, what happens metabolically. We also have an interesting module, growth and development. I'm going to highlight that in a couple of slides time. And it's an interesting module because we have some experts who teach on the module, who are real world leaders in the field, actually. And also within these modules, these 2 core modules, we have really important practicals. And these are really key practicals to it's the bread and butter of being a nutritionist. So for example, nutrition metabolism 2 here, we ask the students, what we do is we go to the cruciform building, which is opposite the main UCL gates, if you know UCL, and we have some labs in there. So we go to the dry labs and we specifically measure energy expenditure, so how many calories you burn per day. So what we do is we use specific bits of equipment. So for example, we can measure, okay, how much oxygen that you consume and how much carbon dioxide you produce during rest and also during exercise. So we get students to go on an exercise bike, and we can assess then how many calories you're burning. So we get the students to do that. It's a very fun practical. And again, and Anissa can talk to you about that later. But it's a very fun practical that students always really enjoy. But it's again the bread and butter of what you need to do to become a nutritionist, to understand, for example, how many calories do you require each day? How do you work that out? How do you assess that? So within that module, we teach you how to do that. In the growth and development module, we teach you how to measure body composition. So you probably know, and you've probably seen on the news and all the rest of it, you see nutritionists typically, for example, look at things like obesity, for example. So we teach you how to measure these things. So you've probably heard of the body mass index before, okay, which is obviously very widely used, which just looks at weight and height. But we teach you how to measure, for example, exactly how much fat mass a person has or how much skeletal muscle someone has by using different techniques. Again, we do that in a lab setting, and the students act as participants, and we use some really basic techniques and also some advanced techniques. So you may have heard of skin fold calipers before. So these little caliper devices where you can measure how much fat you have subcutaneously in different sites. For example, could be on the arm, where you measure skin fold thickness of the tricep or the bicep area, for example. But we also have some more advanced techniques such as bioelectrical impedance, where we put a very small harmless current through the body, and we can measure resistance or impedance. We call it resistance to current flow. And so we get an idea, for example, of how much fat-free mass you have. So, for example, your muscle tissue, your organs, and how much fat mass you have. So these are really important practicals that we want you guys to basically partake in and learn how to do the things that a proper nutritionist would do. So in term 1, we have nutrition mentality 2. In term 2, we have growth and development. Then across both terms, we have a long, thin module called malnourishment and obesity, which covers basically everything from undernutrition all the way to obesity. We talk about things such as eating disorders. We talk about the effects of fat mass, of having too much fat mass, how it affects things like inflammatory pathways, cardiovascular disease risk, and how then that has an impact on things like nutrient requirements and recommendations. Alongside both these modules, we have a statistical methods module, which is important because when you conduct research, so for example, in your final year, some students choose to do primary research projects where they're collecting data, or a data analysis project. And so the methods that you learn within this module are absolutely vital to be able to do these different statistical methods and to analyze data. So this is really important. It's a critical component of doing a proper science-based degree, actually. This also works side by side with the research methods module. The idea of the research methods module in term 2 of year 2 is it's basically to understand, well, what is research in the first place? And what types of research do you have? What types of research papers do you have? And try and explain the difference between, for example, what do we mean by a primary research paper compared to, say, literature review or a systematic review, all these things that you might have heard of before. And how do you perform them? And what makes, for example, a good research study? So one of my colleagues, Dr. Simon Eaton, who co-leads the module with me for growth and development, he leads this research methods module again, and this is absolutely essential before thinking about your dissertation that you're going to take in year 3. So how to conduct research. And again, these modules are essential. If you want to do research later on in your master's or PhD level, then again, this is where this becomes essential. In year 3, this is where we get to do some really interesting cutting edge modules. And we've tried to make it, it's incredibly fascinating actually. And again, I don't think there's anyone in the UK, any other course that has such an interesting range of modules, to be honest. Obviously, I might be biased, but this is my opinion. So, for example, in term 1, this is applied nutrition. This is a clinical nutrition module.
Adrian.
Hi.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I'm not sure. Are you still sharing your slides?
Yep.
Because I can't see the slides anymore. I don't know if it's just me or if everyone experiencing that.
Yeah, if you can share them again, Adrian.
That's strange, isn't that weird? That's really strange. Sorry about that. I don't know why that happened.
Yeah, you're sharing your screen now.
How strange. We'll try again. If it happens again, tell me, okay?
Okay.
So where do we get to? So this is year 3, okay, of our course. So as I said, in term 1, we have this applied nutrition module, which is a clinical nutrition module. So what we do is we look at specific disease states and, for example, what happens. So how it affects nutritional status, how it affects metabolism, and then specific recommendations and requirements for different populations. So for example, it could be in cancer, for example. We look at a wide range of conditions, also things like motor neuron disease, for example. And we look at liver disease, we look at kidney disease, a whole range of different conditions, diabetes, for example, as well. So again, this is essential if you want to become a dietitian later on. Also in term 1, so I co-lead this module, the applied nutrition module. I also lead the sports nutrition module. So again, this is a really interesting module where we talk about, again, requirements for different athletes for certain nutrients and recommendations. But we also cover some very current and cutting edge topics, such as, for example, eating disorders in athletes and disordered eating. Something called relative energy deficiency in sport, which is basically the idea that when you have competitive athletes, they put themselves under a high amount of physical and psychological stress and tend to not eat as well as they should do. And that has a major impact on nutritional status and health. And so there's some very interesting research on that at the moment. So we have some experts in the field come and talk to students about that. We have some guest lectures on that, and also things like exercise endocrinology. So, for example, how do these things affect our hormone systems? And some of you guys may know this already from your A levels, that hormones are absolutely critical in terms of how your body functions. So we cover these things, and these are very cutting edge areas. We even have a lecture this year on muscle dysmorphia, body dysmorphia in athletes. Again, you might have seen reports in the press about. We also have modules on public health nutrition and specifically behavioural nutrition. So in the term one, we have a behavioural nutrition module where we look at social and psychological aspects of understanding nutrition, again, how things, think about recommendations, but things, for example, how the media might affect nutritional intake. And alongside that, again, with all of our modules, and I'll talk to you about that in a few slides' time, there's a whole range of different and innovative assessments. So I'm just thinking for the behavioural nutrition module, we ask students to write, for example, a newspaper article, which is quite, is very different to your standard exam and essay type questions that you might have for an assessment. So that's also a very interesting module. We also have the option of doing optional modules. So one optional module in year 3, and sorry, the titles are on it. It's actually there's a module called the microbiome in health and disease, which covers including things like gut microbiome, but also in general the microbiome throughout the body. And we also have a specific module called Where Mind Meets Brain, looking at things such as neuropsychology. What's interesting is the person that actually leads that module, so that's Professor Paul Robinson, is also the course director for our MSc in eating disorders and clinical nutrition. So he's an eating disorder expert. So all these sorts of things, you can see we've got some real interesting themes through the course that are very clinically focused. So, for example, in the applied nutrition module, and you have this other module where you have specific things related to eating disorders. We also cover obviously obesity from every different angle, from a molecular angle, metabolic angle, but also from a behavioural nutrition angle, from a public health nutrition angle as well, which leads into term 2. So this is where these two modules work side by side. So we have a public health nutrition and epidemiology module. And this also leads on from work from in year 2. You might remember we had the nutrition cancer risk module, which looks at epidemiology, for example, specifically related to cancer, obviously, but this again ties in quite nicely with this module. We then have, again, a very novel module, which I don't think anyone's doing anything like this actually in the UK. This is frailty and aging. I module lead this one. It's a real interest and passion of mine, which basically looks at what happens when we age. So what happens again at a physiological level, what happens to our hormones, what happens to things like muscle and bone tissue, for example, and how does that predispose us to conditions like malnutrition and like things like muscle wasting, and how does that affect things like disability risk and something called frailty. And then alongside that, obviously things like quality of life and morbidity and mortality. So this is a really interesting module where we discuss this at depth. And then think about specifically, we have lecturers come in to talk specifically about how we can have specific interventions to combat this, whether it's by nutrition, but also exercise and drugs. And that's another thing to note here, again, because of the nature of this course, we were interested in like a multimodal approach to treating these different things and understanding them. So we talk a lot about not just nutrition, but things like exercise, things like drugs as well, medications that can impact on these conditions. We also have a very specific module that I co-lead, which is nutrition and cancer treatment. So this is basically once someone has cancer, we talk about what happens to the body. So how does cancer affect metabolism? How does it affect nutritional status in a patient? And then we talk about what can we potentially do? What does the research say in terms of trying to treat and help patients and try and improve quality of life? And again, there are certain things again that the key themes again that we cover relate to nutrition, exercise, and drugs and medications. And again, that's a very novel module that I don't think anyone's doing anything similar in the UK. So we did have a nutrition, health, and culture module, which looks at specific anthropology type studies, but I don't think they'll be running next year. Maybe the year after, maybe when you guys come in a few years' time, it will be back up and running again. So this is run alongside the anthropology department. Now, these are just examples. We have many other modules that you can take as an option. If you're interested in something else completely different, it can be organised. But you can't change these core modules, because they're intimately linked with the Association for Nutrition Accreditation. And then you have this dissertation module that runs the whole way through term 1 and term 2, and then you submit in term 3. And that can be either a literature review of around 8,000 words, where you basically do a review of the current literature on a topic, or it can be a primary research project where it could be, for example, I'll give an example of a project we've had this year. We've had a student who recruited some female exercisers, athletes, and gave questionnaires, measured some body composition using these different techniques we talked about, and we also did some blood testing as well, looking at hormones and trying to relate these different factors. We have other projects where we have data analysis projects, which could be analysing a clinical data set, and some examples of the stuff that I've been involved with relate to, for example, looking at malnutrition and this thing that I was talking about before, things like muscle wasting and frailty in older populations, in care homes and in hospitals, for example. So, but there's lots of different things you can do if you're interested in biochemistry or molecular type interests. Then we've got other supervisors who are more biochemistry focused. If you want to do a lab-based project in a laboratory environment, you can do that too. So in terms of expertise, now I mentioned this at the beginning. So first of all, I want to highlight we have some really interesting and fantastic modules. So and these topics here, that, like for example, the cancer treatment module and the frailty and aging module, that they're really current, cutting-edge topics. So you might not be aware of this now, but they really are cutting-edge topics. And we try to have some real experts in the field come in and do guest lectures. And this is across the board, across all of our modules. This is the common theme. Because UCL is very essentially researching, it's a research-intensive university, this trickles down into our courses and our modules. So it's very much research-led. So again, if this is something that's important for you because you want to do a PhD later on, for example, this might be the course for you. I've got an example, and this is the module that we run, the growth and development module. And we're quite proud of this module. This is run for 4 years now. And we have some real eminent professors, you know, some real experts in the field who come to give lectures for us. So I'll just quickly leave the screen for a minute. If you can still see the screen. Anissa, can you see the screen okay?
Yeah, it's all good. I can see the timetable.
Oh, great. So this is just an example of one of the modules, right? So it gives you an example of the timetable, and it gives you an example too of the things that we cover. So this is the growth and development module, right, that runs in term 2. So you can see we have the teaching week, that's the university week, and the date. So we would run this every Wednesday. It's actually 11 till 1 or 11 till 2. So many weeks we'll have 3-hour sessions. And then you can see, if you look down at the topics, we cover everything from pre-pregnancy, and pregnancy, all the way to early life growth, nutrition, infant feeding, so things like breastfeeding, for example. And then we go through to nutrition in childhood and adolescence. And then we cover some other aspects. You know, I mentioned earlier, for example, that if we want to measure, for example, as being a nutritionist, things like body composition, so what your body's made up of, this is really critical. So we've included that within this module. Because, for example, during development, during adolescence, during growth, for example, you lay down a lot of tissue, a lot of fat-free mass tissue, a lot of bone tissue, a lot of muscle tissue. So we talk about this, you know, we talk about how this happens. For example, I do a lecture on pubertal growth and lean tissue accretion, where we talk about all the nutrition, metabolism, the hormones involved. We talk about different signaling pathways involved. This is throughout the life cycle and aging. We talk about development, for example, muscle tissue, and we measure this. So we actually have a practical, where we get you guys to the lab, we measure these things practically. So again, as a nutritionist later on, if you have clients, you know how to measure fat mass, we know how to measure muscle mass, for example. And then you can see as we go down, also you have a few lectures as well on specifically on aging, and we look at things like some other novel areas such as nutrition and bone health in older adults. And in the past 2 years, it's incredibly fascinating. We've included some other lectures, for example, looking at appetite development during childhood growth. We're also looking at microbiome development during childhood growth, which is incredibly fascinating, really cutting edge research topics. But alongside this, you might notice that we have some key professors. We have Professor Atul Singhal, Professor Rebecca Hardy, Professor Mary Futrell, and Professor Tim Cole come to give lectures in our module. And in my opinion, this is pretty much unheard of for a standard BSc undergraduate year 2 module. These guys are experts in the field. They've literally written the textbooks, and we get them to come in and talk about their research areas that link to this. So a good example here is Tim Cole, who actually developed, you may have heard of childhood growth charts. So Tim was instrumental in developing the childhood growth charts that you may have even seen before, and working with the World Health Organization. And Professor Mary Futrell, for example, she's an expert in infant feeding. So these guys have written the textbooks, you know. So this is just one example of one of our modules that runs. So I hope I've got my point across here. It's very research focused. We have some real experts in the field come to give lectures. The other thing to note is because we have this close proximity, very strong close links with UCL Hospital and Royal Free Hospital up the road, this is the reason as well. We tend to have lots of clinicians, medics and dietitians teaching on our modules. So for example, if we go back to these modules here, the applied nutrition module is mostly taught by dietitians actually, with a few added lectures from some of our guys from the department. And the same here with the nutrition and cancer treatment module, where it's again taught principally by medics, so cancer medicine specialists and dietitians. And this, to be honest, is a real strength for our course, that we obviously work side by side with UCL Hospital, Royal Free Hospital. It also means that we can also offer projects, so dissertation projects that are clinically focused. So we've had, for example, in the past, some of the dietitians and the medics actually supervise students and do some really good work. And a lot of that work has gone on to be published. We've had some students go on to do further masters and PhDs in topics, and some students go off to do dietetics because they have the interest in that area. In terms of our assessment strategy, because we have, first of all, so we obviously have a wide range of modules. And the idea is, the whole point of this, we try to also have a wide range of assessments to teach you, so you learn a wide range of transferable skills. And the idea is that that then helps you in your future career. So for example, we have everything from very standard multiple choice question exams. We have short answer question exams, so we do look at a mini essay, for example. We get you to do a literature review, for example. So the idea is with a literature review, you're taking together all sorts of different bits of information from different journals on current research. And the idea is you have to synthesize and summarize the information. And this is essential, again, for your dissertation. And again, if you want to do further research. So these things, they're essential skills. Again, linking into research, we get you doing practical reports. So when you do the body composition practical and the energy expenditure practical I mentioned, you do a report on it, okay? And again, that is an essential skill that if you want to become a researcher, you need to be able to know, you need to know how to do this, okay? So you get some experience with knowing how to write in a scientific, academic fashion. We also have some quite fun projects and quite novel projects. So we do video projects, for example. We have lots and lots of presentation assessments, which are some individual, more individual at third year, and group presentations. And we have both PowerPoint presentations, we have poster presentations, and the idea of that, we have quite a lot of these, and the idea is essentially it prepares you then for working in the real world. So when you go to a new job, or even going for a job interview, for example, it prepares you to know how to present, how to work with other people, and present, whatever it is, a specific topic or a specific, bit of work that you've been doing, working as a group, some analysis, for example, and then you have those really key skills. We also get you doing other things such as business case studies as well, which again, if you, for example, straight away there's an application to the business field, and out of interest, we actually have had students go on to do, I can think of 2 students from our alumni who've gone on to do masters actually in business economics, but they're interested down the line in trying to direct those business skills towards something nutritionally driven. So it could be working in a nutrition company, for example, as a business analyst. And also you have a dissertation as well, where you do a large body of work, which again I've mentioned before, can be as primary research or as a literature review, which again is absolutely essential if you want to go on to do further study. I mentioned to you before that our courses are fully accredited with the Association for Nutrition. So the Association for Nutrition is the governing body in the UK for nutrition. And the idea is that once you've graduated from the course, you can then call yourself an associate registered nutritionist. So I'm just going to stop sharing the screen there. Hopefully you can still see me. And I'm just going to go on to the Association for Nutrition website. So again, you can just put this into Google, put in Association for Nutrition, and come up with this. It gives you all the information. If you want to become a nutritionist, it tells you everything you need to know. It tells you about accredited programs. So if you look here on accredited programs, it will go through, for example, different undergraduate programs. So we're on here. If you go down the list, it tells you about undergraduate and postgraduate programs. It tells you about how this whole process works. So for example, once you're accredited from the degree, you become an associate registered nutritionist. And then after at least 2 to 3 years of postgraduate study, you become a full registered nutritionist. So for example, I'm a full registered nutritionist. So if we put my name in here, so you can say find a nutritionist. Wait for it to search. 1 second. So you can see I'm here as a full registered nutritionist in nutritional sciences. So the reason why this is important, because you might be thinking, well, what does it matter? The reason it matters, if you look in the career section for jobs, you'll realise that actually it's really important to be a associate or fully registered nutritionist. So for example, this is a recent job that's been advertised and as a nutritionist, and they always ask for either, for example, an undergraduate degree in nutrition or dietetics in this case, and they look for someone who's either a registered nutritionist or associate registered nutritionist. So you have to have done a course that's been accredited. So that's absolutely key. It's essential. So our courses are fully accredited, which we're very pleased about. It's been accredited for nearly 2 years now, and we're incredibly pleased about that. And if you have any questions about that at the end, I'm happy to take some questions. In terms of careers, now, again, because of our course, because it's very applied medical sciences focused in the beginning, It also, and also because some of those modules we cover throughout alongside things like public health nutrition modules and behavioural nutrition modules, it means that you can work in a whole range of different fields and study, do postgraduate study in a whole range of different things. I can think of so many examples. Straight away, I'm thinking of examples of students who've gone on to do, for example, Anissa, who've gone on to do dietetics. We've had a couple of students go on to do dietetics, actually. In fact, actually, in our current second year, nearly half the class will go on to do dietetics, because we attract students who typically want to go and do things that are more clinical or maybe public health nutrition focused. I've got students who've gone to, as I mentioned before, work in business. We have students going to do PhDs. I have a student who's gone to do public health nutrition epidemiology PhD recently at UCL. We've had students go on to do sports nutrition master's degrees. I can think of 2 students who've gone to do that and then gone to work and take clients, for example, working with athletes. We have students who go on to do want to do teaching and do teacher training. So there's lots of different things that you can do. Typically each year as well, I tend to have students who want to go on and do graduate entry medicine. So for example, I can think of a student now who's actually transferring from our course to go on to do medicine. And then again, because of the nature of our course, in those first few years, you can do that. As long as obviously you've got your A levels and the rest of it in you know, biology, chemistry, maths, physics, or whatever, you can do that. So we have students go on to do a whole wide range of things, even things like drug design master's degrees and food policy as well, which is really exciting and really fantastic. And just to also big up, as I mentioned earlier, first of all, we have a whole suite of postgraduate programs. So we find that a lot of our students who do the BSc go on to do one of our MSc programs. So we have an MSc in clinical and public health nutrition, eating disorders and clinical nutrition, obesity and clinical nutrition, and now we have the MSc in dietetics, where you go on to become a registered dietitian. And again, these programs are run by experts. Okay, so especially the ones that are clinically focused, these are clinicians who are experts in the field. So as I mentioned before, for example, Professor Paul Robinson, who runs the eating disorders program and also run the optional module that you may remember I mentioned earlier for the BSc. So he's been an eating disorder clinician for some decades now and is a real expert. For the obesity program, for example, we have a number of experts from UCL Hospital, who come and teach on the program. And similarly, for the dietetics program, we have experts from all over the place, but principally UCL Hospital, who come and teach on our program. So we find it's very exciting for us that we have these whole range of programs that all instantly tie together with these current themes. So any questions at all on this, I'm happy to take them. Or maybe Anissa, maybe you can take some questions specifically on dietetics. And that is it. So does anyone have any questions? I will stop sharing. I'll go back to the main screen.
If you guys have any questions, you can pop them in the Q&A part of the Zoom feature. But just to kickstart off the questions, so Adrian, for this program, what are you looking for in a personal statement, and what advice do you have for those applying for this program?
So we want to get across a real interest and passion in the topic. And I think that's what I was trying to get across at the beginning. So for example, with myself, I had a real interest in, because I was unfit as a kid, that's how I got into nutrition and exercise, you know. So I had a personal story, you know, we're interested in those stories, you know, because that generates an interest, generates a passion. And so, you know, we want to hear that. If for example, you know, you have a family member who works in the field, for example, or, you know, you're aware of certain nutritional conditions for whatever reason, then we want to hear that. You know, and if you, for example, if you already know what you want to do, if you know you want to become, you know, an obesity expert, you know, you just had that interest for the past few years, and you know, you're really interested in the topic. We want to hear these stories. Okay, very important. but you also have the background. So obviously, I'm sure you guys on the call today will know this, but you need to have those relevant background A levels, so very good A levels, and those key requirements. So we're looking particularly, it's biology and chemistry in particular. That's what you need to have good grades in.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
So I can't even see, is there a chat? Let's have a look, see if there's any. So let's see.
If there are no specific questions, I could talk a little bit about
Yeah,
my journey.
that would be fantastic. Yes, please. That would be great.
So like Adrian said, I did have an interest in nutrition before I did my undergrad. So I did work experience in a bariatrics clinic. That was kind of my first exposure to nutrition on the clinical side. And that kind of got me interested in how is kind of the first instance when I realized how important diet could be for your health.
Yeah.
Because obviously before that you kind of have an idea, but I didn't really understand the impact until then. So then I did research, and then I heard of UCL, and I just like I know its reputation, and I was sure that it would give me a good background and support and the foundations I needed to then go on. And because of that, I also then wanted to do my master's here, which is where I heard about the dietetics program. Whilst I was in the undergrad program, I heard about the dietetics program here being
Good timing for
developed.
you, isn't it? Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think when I first started at the undergrad, there was no MSc dietetics program.
That's right.
I think
Yeah.
it was developed during my second and third year.
Yeah.
So then so to get more experience as a dietitian, I then worked in an eating disorder clinic where I worked with a dietitian there to help adolescents living with an eating disorder. And then I decided to apply again at UCL just because of my experience here as an undergrad. I had a quite positive experience, and I knew that I would be able to have that again as an MSc student and the support. So then I applied as for the MSc dietetics program, and I must say it's been quite enjoyable. It's been a very interesting course, and I've really enjoyed the module so far. I'm also starting placement next week on Tuesday, which is quite interesting because I'm doing it at Great Ormond Street Hospital, and I'm working with kids, but then it'll be in a different kind of wards, which I'm excited about, and I think will be very interesting. So it's similar to the nutrition and medical sciences course, but it's very different because it's more clinical focused. So if that is something you're interested in, if that is something you're interested in working with patients and helping them with different conditions, I think it would very much suit you. If that is something that tickles your fancy. If there's any more questions that anyone wants to specifically ask.
Because it'd be nice to hear from you. I can't see if there's anything in the chat or not. Is there any?
Olivia does say, is there an opportunity to study the gut microbiome before third year?
So we touch on this, Olivia, but not in massive depth. So you will see this, for example, I know that you have there's 1 or 2 lectures in the second year, for example. But if you're specifically interested in it, like I say, there's literally a whole module called the microbiome in health and disease in the term 1 of year 3. So if that's your real interest, then and you can even do your BSc project on it. And we've had students do that before, where if it's something that you really want to do, if this is your strong interest, we can identify potential supervisors. This is what we do for our students. For example, over the summer of the year 2, we can try and identify some supervisors. You can dedicate your whole dissertation to, for example, the gut microbiome, which can work then alongside this module, and could lead to all sorts of things, like a PhD, for example. Does that help? Anything else?
Mm,
Great.
if that's all the questions everyone has for today, I think we can end it there. So thank you all so much for joining us. Oh, hang on. I think there's one question left. Oh no, Olivia said that does help. Thank you.
Thanks, Olivia.
So thanks again so much for joining us. So we are out of time and we will leave it there. However, if you could please provide us with your feedback about today's session by filling out the survey, which we will display on your browser following this event. And thank you again all for your comments and questions. And thank you to Adrian C for an excellent session.
Thanks,
Hope
Olivia.
everyone has a great evening.
Cheers. Take care, everyone.
Bye. Thank
All the
you.
best. Bye.